Welcome to another episode of Anyone Have a Pencil? Today we're going to do something a little bit different. I have my colleague, partner, and coworker, Hattie Day from Modern Day Living here. Hattie, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
Of course. This is our first podcast together.
I know. We haven't done one yet. I've just always been behind the scenes, and I'm happy to be in front of the camera this time.
She's always been in production mode. Now she's in interview mode.
Yes.
Today we're going to do something a little bit different. We got a bunch of questions from our clients and investors and wanted to handle those questions about the state of the real estate market, what to look for, best practices, and some things to avoid to really protect your profit and your cash. So I want to jump into those. But Hattie, before we get into that, tell us a little bit about Modern Day. We're introducing you to our viewers for the first time. So tell us about that and what all you do, because it's everything under the sun almost.
Almost. I wear a lot of hats. I mean, I'm definitely just in my very first year of starting the brokerage with Modern Day Living, and it's been, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. But, I'm having a lot of fun learning how to, get it going. So we have a total of 5 agents with us. We have the brokerage in Lubbock, Texas, and also Abilene, Texas. We're killing it. We had our best month in July. August was great too, and just kind of getting our feet under us. So not only do we help buyers and sellers in this market, but we also manage just shy of 100 homes. And so we're looking to keep that management sector a little bit smaller. We want to definitely keep all of our owners on a first name basis and just help them, get the full asset protection on that.
Yeah, so
side.
It's more client focused and boutique.
Mm-hmm.
So let me ask you this, because you were a successful real estate agent before you started the brokerage.
Yeah.
So why start a brokerage? Because then that takes you from production to basically business owner, manager. What was the idea behind that?
Yeah, so I just knew it was my time to kind of step back and really bleed into my agents everything that I've learned. So I was very, grateful for the time that I spent under a lot of my team leads. They taught me everything that I know. And so I just wanted to also be that for somebody else. Whenever I'm still very young, I'm 29 years old, but I learned so much from a very young age in real estate. So I started in real estate when I was 21, started out in property management, and just knew that my mentors were great and I needed to step into that role for myself. And out of production at that point. So really just trying to make my agents that I have under me just even better than I ever was.
Love that. What do you, I like to explore everybody's like kind of mentorship of what they've learned from people. Mm-hmm. What would you say are like some of the best takeaways that you learned from the people that you kind of grew up under on the real estate side?
Yeah. So of course we're in the business of serving people. So I'm never going to go into a transaction just chasing that commission check. I think that that's something that whenever you finally figure that out as an agent, because when you're a newer agent, you are chasing that commission check. I mean, 100%.
Well, you're not getting a salary, right? So it's like, hey, the only way I'm going to get paid and put food on my plate is if I can get some deals closed.
Exactly. And so, but you really have to change your mindset. And whenever you change your mindset to where you are in the business of helping and serving people, the business just starts to come.
Yeah.
And you don't really have to worry about that as much. But whenever you're chasing that commission check and you're doing everything you can do to, get that check in your hand, it kind of starts to slow down. And so really just putting that forward for everybody and just letting people know like, hey, we are here to serve people, and that the check will come after that.
Yeah. I think that's a mistake a lot of business owners. I think that's a mistake a lot of people make is if you put profit before people, you're bound to fail. And I also just don't think that, I think money is a good motivator to challenge you and to give you a goal. But if it's your only motivation, you're not in love with what you do, you're not, obsessed with the other aspects of the business, you're just going to set yourself up to, fall apart, right? Because
exactly,
sometimes the deal falls apart and there is no commission check there. And then how do you deal with, how do you deal with the people that are also going through that with you at the same time?
Exactly. And, I've talked to an agent who actually was just kind of going through this, and she was frustrated. She was frustrated. I just want to get this deal to the closing table. And, her clients could feel that from her. And
Yeah.
so it's really just, kind of calming yourself down, always being the level-headed person, laying all the facts out in front of the client and letting them decide. Because ultimately, it's not your job to sell that to them. It's your job to serve them. It's your job to help them get to that closing table. But if it's not right for them, then, you kind of got to steer them in a different direction and really just help them ultimately. And so that's really what I've loved to figure out. It's definitely a huge puzzle, and all the pieces got to fit correctly.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. And I also, as a testament to the company that you run and Modern Day Living, and I've said this 1,000 times, I mean, every market downturn kind of separates the professionals from the people that just jump into the water when it's warm. And correct me if I'm wrong, I think like 75% of real estate agents are doing other jobs now that got their license and were operating over the last 4 or 5 years. So now what you're seeing is the cream rising to the top, and the people that are client focused and people focused and trying to navigate an ever changing market, that's who survives. And everybody else is serving coffee or doing personal training or whatever it is that real estate agents do when they're not listed property for sale.
No, you're totally right. I mean, actually, that 75% that are looking for other work, they probably listed about an average of one home in the last year because of everything that is changing and going on in the market. And so really, how can you set yourself apart? How can you make yourself different? And I think that leading with faith and having a kingdom-based business is really what sets us apart. Because, we're not chasing that commission check. We want to genuinely grow relationships with all of our clients, because you're going to see them at the grocery store after you close the deal. And how awful would it be if you're going down the grocery, store aisle and you see a client and you're like, oh, I don't want to see that client. I completely just chased that commission check. I didn't help them at all.
Yeah.
I didn't lead with my faith. I did not help them at all. And so it's just like, are they going to be a returning client? You want to keep that business going.
Yeah. And doing what's best for them first instead of trying to be self-serving.
Yeah.
So, one big thing that's changed, and a question that I've gotten, asked, and I've asked other agents that we've worked with, and one of the big moving pieces here is that big lawsuit over real estate commissions, right? So how has that changed? I think that drove a lot of real estate agents out of the market, first of all.
Oh, yeah.
But how has that changed, like, your business model or how you go about your day and how you run a company? Because and what has it changed with your clients, right? People that want you to list property or what, either side of the transaction.
Yeah. So this past month entirely of August, we had started putting that practice into place, before it went into effect on the 17th of August, but really just getting really good at communication. And, before you were trying to, sell the property in that first conversation whenever you're having with that consumer. But now you're really selling yourself and your value first and foremost, because you have to get that buyer agent representation or tenant agent representation signed before you even show the property. So can
you explain the change though, really quick? So this is my understanding, and my brain is dumb, so you have to bear with me. But from the very little I've read about it and understood, is that so typically a seller goes to list a property, right? Typical market is 6% commission, 3% to the buy side, 3% to the sell side. That's like a typical transaction, right? But ultimately, the seller is paying the full 6%, even though the buyer's agent represents the buyer. The seller's paying that commission.
That's correct.
Right?
Yeah.
So what's changed from that? What's the new formation now?
Yeah, so it's really kind of the same. I mean, that's ultimately kind of how we are approaching it. We don't want that seller to not actually offer that out to the buyer's agent, because it's going to put their house in a niche where it just, whenever you're looking and you're seeing that they aren't hiring or they're not offering that buyer agent commission, it really kind of, changes the mind of the buyer. Oh gosh, I'm going to have to roll this into my closing costs. Like, how am I going to afford this? I'm going to have to put in my loan, whatever is going to not ultimately work for them. It's not going to benefit the buyer in any way, really. And so
ultimately it ends up hurting the seller.
Yes. And then it hurts the seller because
Yep.
then they don't sell the house. And so ultimately, the conversation that we're having with our sellers as they are, coming into our listing appointments, we actually call them strategy plan appointments because we want them to know that we are on their team and that we're here to help them sell it. But ultimately, what we're doing is we're just approaching it as if, hey, do you want to advertise that we are doing this for the buyer's agent, or do you not want to advertise it? And so there's on the new listing agreement, there is a section in there where you can offer it, but you don't have to advertise it. And so whenever a buyer agent is bringing in a new contract, we're just asking, or we're saying, hey, the seller's willing and able to look at any offers with any buyer's agent commissions. Mm-hmm. And so it kind of can put their house in a niche to where buyer's agents don't want to show it. Mm-hmm. And so ultimately just having that conversation with the seller that, hey, we're still trying to keep this practice in place. We're not trying to, gouge you in your proceeds for anything. We just ultimately want to help you get your house
just like
sold
laying out all
price.
the options and the strategy and saying like, here's your really, I guess, 3 options.
Yeah.
You can offer the 6%. You can market that you're offering 3% or not market that you're offering 3%, mm-hmm. or you can just offer 3% to us and then the buyer's agent, it's up to them to negotiate with the buyer side, right?
Exactly.
So have you had any conversations like that on the buy side where, what's happening in the marketplace? Are more sellers taking advantage of that? And have you seen that take place? And then you're having a conversation with the buyer where like, hey, like, I need a 3% commission. Are you negotiating the commission? Like, how's that taking shape?
Yeah. So ultimately, we want to do what we can to get the deal done. So whenever we're having that buyer agent, first interaction and we're signing that buyer representation agreement, we are putting on there what our cost of service is. So like you said, 3% for the buyer side. And so we put that straight on the first page. I mean, it's out there. That's what our fee is, to show this property. If the selling agent or the seller is not going to offer that to you, you are ultimately going to have to pay for it. And so buyers are kind of just freaking out whenever you explain that to them. They're like, oh, well, and that's the first question that they're going to ask, is the seller paying for the agency commission?
Right.
And so it has kind of put a little bit of a shift on buyers because, they're starting to have to come out of pocket with stuff, and especially on tenant representations, because whenever you're not really interacting with tenants before you meet them in person for the first time. Mm-hmm. So actually getting that tenant representation signed can be a hard conversation. They're like, why would I sign this with you? I don't even know you. So getting really, really good at going back to the basics and just explaining.
What's tenant representation? Can you explain that?
Yeah. So before, tenants kind of had like a way out. Like they could go to any, landlord or any management company and say, hey, I want to rent this house from you. And ultimately, they could have been with an agent before, and that agent could have showed them 20 plus houses. They didn't find it with that agent. They ultimately found it with a different management company. That management company took that commission home.
Gotcha. Okay.
So it's tying that tenant to that agent for the longevity of their.
So you're talking about on the rental side.
Yeah.
Yeah. And mm-hmm. a lot of people don't know that too, of like mm-hmm. everyone, and myself included, I make fun of real estate agents a lot. I mean, just
you make
full
fun
disclosure.
Of me a lot.
Yeah. But I also, I think you'll never like lose more money than if you try to save money on an attorney. And yes. I have the same thought process with real estate agents and brokers mm-hmm. is like, don't go with the discount broker or like high volume brokers. They're literally just doing what like Redfin and Zillow are doing for you.
Yeah.
Finding a really good broker. And luckily we've found some really good ones, your company included, where like they're worth every penny that they get paid on that transaction. They do all the due diligence that, helps us get comfortable with the deal. And they go above and beyond, market analysis, communication with mm-hmm. the title company, with the seller's attorney, like all of those things mm-hmm. that you want like a little buffer in between. That's worth the right cost, especially an agency that knows their stuff. They can, mm-hmm. Comb through everything, lay it out to us, and then we feel comfortable signing. I mean, we do our own due diligence. same as I do whenever I'm like in a lawsuit or like doing a legal proceeding.
Yeah.
But you want that extra buffer and you want to trust the professionalism of the group that's on the other side of the table. I think that's an important thing.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So that being said, it has changed like how much you are willing to charge or can charge. And your spending is what a lot of people don't know is like, if I'm a tenant and I ask you to represent me as a tenant, you are showing me 20, 30 properties.
Mm-hmm.
It is hours and hours and hours of time. Mm-hmm. And I think one thing that this new agreement has done is like validate that time for agents.
Exactly.
Of like, hey, this is what I'm worth. Mm-hmm. You want to find someone to do it for way cheaper? Like
Good
more
luck.
power to it.
Yeah.
Go for it.
Yeah.
Right. So it's just, I think correct me if I'm wrong, but I think where like the hammer came down on this is that there wasn't a disclosure. There was a lot of agents, especially over the last like 5 years, taking advantage of the system. Mm. There was like a kind of a good old boy network of agents that like, hey, like I'll give you, 3% on this to bring the buyer. They're in the same agency, whatever, right? It's like, well, why do I need to pay the full 6%? Your buyer came into the agency, two different brokers inside that agency, but it's the same agency. You guys didn't disclose to me that I'm paying the full 6% to the same company. Yeah. Like things like just the conversation that needed to happen.
Yeah.
Right?
Like I said, getting back to the basics and really just, you're not selling the house, you're selling your value in that first conversation that you're having with any buyer, seller, or tenant that you are representing.
Sure.
And so it's really, I had a team meeting with all of my agents and they were like, why did they do this to us? Like, it just makes everything harder. And I ultimately had to just, tell them like, there is a purpose for this. They're really trying to help us in a way. It's going to be kind of some gray areas here and there, but you ultimately wouldn't show a property to a buyer without a pre-qualification or proof of funds, right?
Right.
So that's just another added paperwork on top of it. You want to lay everything out in the beginning, and you want to get that signed, so they know what they're looking at. And so I think that was a gray area for a lot of people selling, buying, renting, because they didn't really know what the value the real estate agent brings. A lot of people call us door openers, and they think that's all that we do. But like you said,
I'm just kidding.
But like you said, you wouldn't, go into a lawsuit and represent yourself, because there's a lot of stuff that attorneys, real estate agents see on a daily basis that just the normal average consumer doesn't typically see.
Yeah.
And so we're able to catch things, that could ultimately be detrimental to the sale. And, whenever you purchase that home and you don't do a home inspection because you buy it from a builder, there's just so many different things that could go wrong. And that's ultimately what we're here to protect the consumer for. Yeah.
And speaking as someone that has, 20 years of experience in real estate and development and, owning rental properties and things like that. I mean, I had to learn those lessons young too, of like, I'm trying to pick up pennies in front of a steamroller. Yeah. Like, hey, I need to save money. I want to go with the attorney that's $150 an hour instead of the $500 an hour attorney.
Yeah.
And I ended up paying way more than I should have as a result of that.
Yeah.
And not because I like lost a lawsuit or anything, because it gets drawn out and that attorney can't protect my interests to get it resolved quickly.
Yeah.
And like in this business, time is money. Like that old adage could never be more true in real estate, right? I mean, especially with how much the market shifts right now and all of the new, pieces of data and information that come in and out of the market on a daily basis. Yeah. If you can't act quickly, you're like a cruise ship trying to make a 90-degree turn instead of a sailboat.
Yeah.
Right. And so having that higher valued attorney or higher valued property manager or higher value real estate representation allows you to be more nimble and act more swiftly, right? Yeah. With more confidence instead of like, now I'm held up for 6 months on this deal that should have closed, in 3 weeks or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So,
and it can hold it up. I mean, I've done a deal where I've had a property under contract for 3 months at a time. And it's just, it's ultimately frustrating for the consumer, but it's steady, slow, and getting everything, all the check marks checked off before we move forward and close the sale. I mean, you don't want to purchase a property and it not have a range, and it not, there's just stuff that you definitely want to check by your real estate agent before you move forward with stuff. Yeah.
Love that. Well, I'm happy to hear that you guys are taking that approach. I mean, ultimately, that law was put into place to protect the consumer, right? Of especially people that may or may not know all the ins and out of I'm a real estate professional. So if I get screwed over, it's my liability. But the average, mom and pop out there in the real estate market, they need to be protected a little bit.
Yeah.
And if you do have a people first business, which you guys have, then it should be easy to have that conversation, explain it, just say, hey, this is the right thing to do. Full disclosure. And now, as long as you're comfortable with that, this is where we're going to take this, project or listing, whatever it is. Right.
Exactly.
Cool. Well, let's jump into,
crazy.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say it's been crazy, but it's been fun to kind of learn it and put that practice into place. So it's very important. And I think that ultimately, it is here to help us, like you said, help the consumer and help us just kind of bring our value to the table.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
All right. Let's jump into some of these investor questions.
Yeah.
All right. We actually have a full list of these, so, pardon this on the camera, but all right. So number one, how can someone navigate today's real estate market, and what's the shape of the market today? So I'll take that one.
Okay.
How can someone navigate today's real estate market? Well, I think the second part of the question is the most important. What's the shape of the market today?
Yeah.
So if we talk about a couple of things that are kind of like constant, right? There's a lot of news in and out every day of like, what's going on with this election? How's that going to affect real estate? What's happening with interest rates? That's like the number one topic. And what are builders doing? Like builder sentiment, inflation, all of that stuff. So let's talk about that really quick.
Yeah.
One, builder sentiment is kind of like this wait and see attitude. We have historically low inventory levels right now in residential real estate with historically high demand. Most of that is a byproduct of people waiting on the sidelines to see what happens with interest rates.
Yep.
So that's number one. Number two is that interest rates are already coming down, not because the Fed has decreased official, Fed funds rates, but because the bond market is already pricing in rate reductions, right? So it makes the bond market softer. And so the borrowing rate on treasury yields is lower, right? So we went from, 7.5% a month ago to what are we at? 6.5% today, 6.3, something like 6.15. Yeah. So, that has already kind of taken shape.
Yeah.
I think the Fed meeting in September, you're going to see rate reductions. I think Fed meeting in December, you're going to see rate reductions, right? So that's kind of the status of the market. Everyone's kind of waiting. Buying has ticked up a little bit. All of the data that you get reports on for, like July contract sales, it's all in arrears, right? So it's all outdated. So you're seeing like stuff pick up. If you want more accurate reporting on stuff like that, Zillow, Redfin, those kind of avenues, they give you up to date, cost of living for, what you pay in rent, average market prices in certain markets, number of contracts, all that stuff. You can pull that data from them.
Yeah.
And then what is also true is that because builders have slowed down a lot, prices for goods and materials are way lower than they were in 2020, 2021, like during the COVID, 3% interest rate periods. And labor's cheap because you can get, your subs, your contractors, building for you at lower prices because you're not competing with 10 other builds, right?
Exactly.
So let's just say right now, prices are lower, costs are lower, and we're going into an environment where interest rates are going to be coming down. They're already coming down. Then officially the Fed lowers rates, brings you lived through this before. That's one benefit of modern day living is, you guys have been through an up cycle and a down cycle of real estate. You guys have seen this. You guys are still around.
Oh yeah.
When interest rates go down, what happens? Right? It's a pandemonium, right? Prices go up.
Mm-hmm.
It becomes a seller's market. Right now it's a buyer's market.
Yeah.
Incentives that builders are offering go away because they don't have to offer those incentives. So they're not giving you $15,000 in, free upgrades or closing costs or rate buy downs or anything like that. Right. So how to navigate this market now? I mean, I think the best thing to do, like what I'm doing actively and what I'm talking to my clients about doing, is if you can go under contract right now on new construction real estate with, a property that's already under construction. So let's say you've got, 3 to 6 months before the property is complete. Mm-hmm. Lock in your price right now. When that property is completed, and let's just use 6 months, right? Interest rates will be officially much lower. Buyers are going to be coming back into the market in droves. There's no inventory. So builders are going to be building as fast as they humanly can, possibly can. Mm-hmm. And so that's going to drive up material costs, drive up labor costs. Prices are going to go up. There's going to be more competition for the same home. Where you have 3 buyers now, you're going to have 9, right? So you're going to find yourself most likely in a position that you have contract equity. So if I put a property under contract right now for $200,000, that's my locked in price with that builder. 6 months from now, when everything else has changed except for my price, that property is probably going to be listed for, $215, $220, $225, and you're going to have competitive offers at like $230, right? So that's how I would position myself. Find some new construction opportunities where you can negotiate your price now. If the sellers are offering incentives, the builders are offering incentives, take full advantage of that, because I think those are going to go away in 2025.
Yeah, no, I agree with that definitely, because, but like you said before, whenever we saw, the market at the highest point, back in 2019, I think, is whenever I had one of my best years. I mean, people were just buying crazy, and a lot of people that were actually in need were just getting beat out by cash buyers or whatever they were doing because of the advantages that the cash does have, or does have. I can't talk right now.
Yeah.
Advantages that it does have. So yeah, ultimately, I agree with you on that for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, so question 2. How will interest rates shape the market? I mean, we talked about that a little bit. Mm-hmm. I mean, the interest rate has a direct corollary to demand. Mm-hmm. But pricing is affected by available inventory too. So if you have all-time low inventory, you have interest rates coming down. Yeah. We've all just lived through this literally, so I don't have to give you a history lesson on what happens there. Interest, money gets cheaper. Yeah. Less properties are available. It's going to be harder to find a home that's affordable, and there's going to be more demand for that property. Mm-hmm. What about inflation and pricing? What do you see today versus in the future? Well, I think that I just answered that question. Yeah. But in terms of inflation, if you look at the inflation numbers, the 2 largest components of inflation right now that are keeping inflation high are literally shelter costs. So how much it costs to buy a home and how much it costs to rent. I don't see that adjusting until there's way more supply than demand. I can't see. And if you're talking about interest rates coming down, I just can't see that really adjusting that much. Mm-hmm. I think that some of the inflation will affect the amount of buyers that come into the market a little bit, right? Because groceries are a little bit more expensive. Gas is a little bit more expensive. Mm-hmm. But I think overall, those figures are starting to get under control. And now it's like who can buy a home and who can't. And there's something like, we'll have to fact check this, but there's something like 2 million additional buyers that would enter the market with, a 0.5% decrease in rates or something crazy like that. Mm-hmm. So think about how many buyers can qualify for a loan if interest rates come down 1% or 1.5% or whatever. So I think you just need to keep an eye on that.
Yeah.
I don't think inflation's really going anywhere. In fact, I think things are just going to be more expensive, and the way that the government and the economy makes up for that is through growth and through paying people more money for the same job.
Yes.
Through tax incentives and providing more circulation. All right. And then next question, I'm going to let you take this one. Is now a good time to buy?
Yeah. So I always tell people whenever they ask me this, what is your family, what situation is your family in? What is going to best benefit you? If you're needing to buy a house right now, then yes, it is a good time to buy. If you're looking to hang on to an interest rate, or if you're looking to, get something bigger, I think that yes, it's definitely a good time to buy. I talked to Cody about this earlier today, and he said, no, it's not. And we laughed, but it's something that is going to definitely be up to you and your family. I think that if now is a need for it to buy, then you go ahead and do it. And then you refinance later, whatever is going to benefit your family the most, I think is what you need to do. I don't think you need to listen to the media. I think you kind of unplug from that whenever you're buying it right now in this situation. There's always going to be, a time whenever you do buy. So divorce, diapers, you get married, so those factors are always going to be happening in today's world. You just kind of have to take everything else out and make it to where it works for you and your family.
Sure. I think when you're talking about a primary residence versus an investment property, I think that's such a different
so true
mindset, because like you said, and I've had this conversation before, like I think owning a primary home is a horrible investment.
Yeah.
But I think it's like some of the best money I've ever spent, just because my family gets to have a place to live, create memories. My wife gets to nest and design and just make our lives comfortable and things like that. And so, that, people were buying in the 80s when interest rates were 15%, right? They were buying primary residences. People are buying 18 months ago when rates were close to 8%, right? So it's really more about like the timing in your life, the stage of life that you're in.
Yep.
Now, is it a great idea to sell your property that has a 3% interest rate locked in so you can buy a house that's worth twice as much money? No. I mean, if you're comfortable where you are, hang tight. Sell that property when interest rates come down so your payment's a lot lower on the, upgraded property that you want to buy. But when it comes to investment property, I think it's always a good time to buy investment property.
Yeah.
I think that the thing that changes is like the market you invest in and the type of property you're buying, right? So like buying residential rental property versus a commercial office complex. I would wait on the commercial office for, a couple of years because the ball's still going to drop for that. I think banks are about to, the delay and pray cycle is over, and they're going to have to start foreclosing or forcing short sales on some commercial office stuff. So I'd hang tight on that. But even then, that's market specific. I mean, that's the case in Chicago and Dallas and Houston and LA and, the largest real estate markets in the US. In Lubbock, there's offices going up everywhere here, and they're all sold and leased, like before they're even done. So take the market specific approach as well. Yeah. Don't look at the macroeconomic approach as much. And, if you're a real estate investor, you assume the responsibility for making that decision, where as a primary home, that's a much more emotional decision. Absolutely. And less to do with like the specific numbers of the market, right? It's like, people are going to buy in Lubbock or wherever they live, no matter what.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. What effect will the election have on real estate? Oh, that's a good one. Well, without getting too political on, political parties or whatnot, I think all you need to do is look at what tax proposals look like. And honestly, I don't think either candidate is going to they're not going to affect what happens with the interest rate. They're not going to affect right now in the short term what happens with inflation and, jobless numbers and stuff like that. It's just the momentum's kind of already set.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to play the monopoly board as it lies right now. And I don't think either candidate's really come out with a full proposal on what they would change about either one of those things. There's like talking points, but not like a full tax proposal. I do think that the Republican candidate, I think Donald Trump, being a real estate guy himself, he has a lot of, tax deductions and incentives that would benefit the real estate market, which would drive pricing up.
Yeah.
I think the other candidate with some of her tax proposals could actually send our economy into a death spiral, which is that's what
I was going to ask you, what you thought about her tax proposal for, illegal immigrants, first time home buying in California.
I think it's insane.
Yeah, me too.
I think anytime, I'll put it this way. And I've talked about this before too, with like rent subsidies, but anytime like that comes from a good place, potentially, like, it's heartfelt. It's like, hey, we want to put roofs over people's head and have them have a good quality of life. Right. But there's so many more things that we should be doing with those tax dollars.
Exactly.
Taking care of our veterans, for instance, homelessness, drug epidemics, making sure our kids get good education. Like there's so many other things I'd rather do with that money.
Yeah.
But specifically when you start subsidizing anything, whenever the government steps in, like Ronald Reagan said this a long time ago, like the most feared words I've ever had is I'm from the government and I'm here to help. Like that's a sign that something's about to go wrong. So if you subsidize people buying homes, their ability to buy homes, you're going to make it more expensive because you're literally just pumping money into a marketplace. If you subsidize rents, it makes rents go up because now I can charge more for my rents, even when they cap it at 5% annual increase. That's an incredible amount of money. We don't increase our rents at the property management level by 5%.
No,
you're talking like 2 or 3.
Yeah.
But now if I'm like, well, they can only afford $1,000 a month, but I can increase it to, $1,049 where I would have done it $1,025. Now I can bump it to $1,049 because the government's paying the difference. It's making it more expensive. So I think it's so inefficient. I think that's crazy.
Yeah, me too.
I think Kamala Harris's tax on unrealized capital gains will never get passed. But I think if the fact, to me, it's scary that that's even a proposal that's on the board, because that's clearly someone that doesn't understand business. Like, how can you pay taxes on something that's not realized?
Yeah.
Where, if I own $1 million in real estate, right? Or if I own $1 million in equity in real estate, right? Okay. Well, 2 years ago, it was worth $1.2 million. Today it's worth $1 million, right? Well, if the tax happened 2 years ago, I'd pay unrealized capital gains on the 1.2 million, and then I lost money on the investment, even though I haven't sold it yet. So do I get my money back? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, why did I pay taxes at the highest valuation, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's like insane. I don't think that's going to pass. I don't think it has any support.
Yeah, I don't think it does either. I think it's putting the media in a frenzy too, because everybody's that's just shocking that she would even propose that. So I think that I don't think it'll pass at all, but it's shocking.
Yeah.
For sure.
I mean, if you think about that too, it's like, they give you some, years to pay it off. It's basically an inverse wealth tax. But the problem with that is, like, if I'm a business owner, let's say I pay myself in company stock. Let's say I'm Elon Musk, right? And Elon Musk, pays himself a very small salary. I don't even know if he takes a salary. Let's say he takes no salary, right? But he owns shares of a company. Okay. The shares of that company are worth, let's say, $1 billion, right? His equity in shares is $1 billion. He should only pay taxes on that when he sells it and it's a realized capital gain. And most of the time, for you to expand business and to keep the business running or to pay yourself anything, you're borrowing against that $1 billion, right? So I take a loan out against my equity and I'm paying interest on that loan, right? Well, then if the federal government comes along and says, hey, keep paying interest on that loan, but now I'm going to tax you on your unrealized capital gain of X amount of dollars, you'd have to sell all of the shares of that stock, or a lot of shares of that stock to pay the tax alone.
Yeah.
Then service the debt. And if someone that owns that many shares of a stock sells that much stock that quickly, it tanks the stock, right? Because it's offering an incredible amount of shares for sale overnight.
Yeah.
As a forced sale, right? I think that's completely irresponsible. Don't see how it would happen, but I've been surprised before.
Yeah. Well, we kind of went off on a tangent, but I think that ultimately is now a good time to buy. I think, yes, I think it always is. I think if it works well for you, it works well for your goals. If you're investing, if you're buying a primary, I think ultimately it just is up to you. Don't listen to anything that's going on. You can buy down the rate. You can, put more money down to make sure the payment is great for you and your family. So I think that definitely, I would say yes to that.
I agree.
Yeah.
And one thing real estate always does is get more expensive, right?
Sure.
So if you're going to be there for the next 30 years, who cares?
Yeah, that's true.
All right. How can you buy properties using directed IRA accounts? So the wording on that's a little funky. The next two are kind of the same. Why should you purchase properties out of your self-directed IRA account? So a lot of people don't know this, but you can self-direct your retirement funds. So if you have a 401k, a Roth IRA, employee pension fund, a traditional IRA, whatever, typically those accounts are either with a brokerage or they're with an employee-sponsored retirement plan, right? Well, all of those IRAs and retirement plans can be self-directed. If they're with a current employer, they can't be self-directed because you're still sponsored until you reach like 59 and a half and they allow early withdrawals. But any IRA account can be self-directed. And what that means is you can take those funds and put them in a custodial account or what's called a checkbook controlled LLC. And you can allocate the funds of your retirement towards other qualified investments. The analogy that I like to use most of all is like everyone's kind of familiar with like Fidelity retirement funds, right? So if I work for, employer X and I have a 401k there, inside of my employer sponsored plan, I can only invest in a certain amount of stocks, mid cap, small cap funds, whatever it is, right? Well, as soon as I self-direct those funds, not only can I buy every stock that exists on any market, but I can also buy cryptocurrencies. I can also buy physical gold and silver, and I can also buy real estate. Owning real estate inside of your retirement account is a huge advantage. And so the next question, why should I buy property inside of my IRA account? Well, if you have $100,000 in your IRA, you can buy property. You can use leverage. So you can buy a $300,000 property inside your IRA. You rent it out. The tenant pays your mortgage and you're collecting cash flow from the rent. You pay all of the expenses out of your IRA, so taxes, insurance, maintenance, property management fees, right? And that $100,000 that was in your IRA, if you're 30 years old and you're not touching it until you're 65, by the time you're 65, that property is paid off or darn near paid off, right? Yeah. So your $100,000 bought you a $300,000 asset with, price inflation. That property by the time you're 65 is probably worth $700,000, $800,000. So one $100,000 investment inside of your retirement account, now you have an $800,000 asset at retirement, right? That's such an incredible acceleration for anybody's retirement. And the benefit of doing it inside of your retirement is you don't pay taxes on any of the capital gains. So let's say you bought and sold 10 properties during that time inside of your IRA. You don't pay capital gains on any of the profit from that property. You don't pay any taxes on the property profits from cash flow either. Yeah. So you're really juicing up your retirement account by doing that. I still think you should own stocks. I still think you should own some crypto. I still think you should own bonds, all that stuff. But just having the flexibility to buy real estate inside of your retirement, I think is one of the biggest, kept secrets in financial history.
Absolutely.
All right, here's a good one for you. Where do you start when you want to build a rental property portfolio? So you have a client that comes into your office. They say, hey, I really want to get some exposure to investment property, how would you get them started and what would you look for?
Yeah, so we're definitely going to kind of see, their financials and see where we can best help them. That's going to, make that asset a performing asset. So I think that that's where I would start whenever I'm talking to a client. But also, I think that the second piece to that is the management that you are going to put in place. I think that is you're obtaining that asset, but now you've got to keep it for the longevity and make sure that that is going to stay a income performing asset. And so, property management in place is going to be absolutely the number one key. But I don't want any of my owners to think that they're going to go into, starting a real estate portfolio and then just be hands off after that.
Yeah.
I want them to know that it is going to take some work. You are going to have to be on the phone with your property manager. I want you to always know that you're going to be involved. And so I think that that's something that I start out by just telling them that I, as a property manager myself, I'm on their team. I have a fiduciary duty to them and I want to perform, the way they foresee it to be performing. But I want to make sure that I'm always, walking that property, keeping that property, in tip top shape. If we let it go under in any way, then that property isn't going to be performing. You aren't going to get that, top dollar rent amount that you can. And so I think that that's where I would start. You see a lot of people get into the BRRRR method or, doing different things just to get their feet wet and get that started. So there's a couple of different ways that you can get it started, but ultimately it falls down to the property management that you put in place. You want to make sure that that's always in tip top shape and performing.
So expanding on that question, what are some things like as a property manager that you can do and that your company does to really drive? I mean, it's cash flow based, right? So,
yes.
Buy a property, appreciation's great, but really I'm buying this property so it services my debt and I make some money off the renter, right? Yep. So if my, debt's $1,000 a month with taxes, insurance, I want to make, $1,250, pocket that $250, right? The market for similar properties is between $900 and, $1,400 a month in rent, right? Let's just say.
Yeah.
What can you do as a property management company and how do you coach your clients of like, hey, how do we get the highest bang for our buck with where we put the lease at? What are some things you can do to the property? All that good stuff.
Yeah. So whenever I take a property on as a new management piece, the first thing that we're going to do is always assess the property, and I take pictures and just really tell them like kind of an after repair value almost. So if there's something where it's not a new construction property, I'm going to say, okay, maybe we do some landscaping here. Maybe we paint the walls here, to make sure that we are going to get the top dollar for that market rent. It kind of just depends on what we're dealing with, if it's a new construction or if it's a pre-existing property. And so really, it's a no-brainer on the risk management side for the new construction because you kind of come into the property, you don't really have to do anything. You're getting that top dollar for the market rent. But whenever you are buying something that is, pre-owned and pre-loved, we want to make sure that we're going in there, we're putting hardwood floors or the luxury vinyl in throughout, taking out carpet, making sure that it is going to be renter friendly.
Yeah.
We want to do as low maintenance as we can for all renters, because ultimately, whenever you're renting a property, it's going to be short term. We can have every now and then a tenant who does stay for 5+ years, but ultimately we want to make sure that property is just going to be kind of basic. We put a great color on the wall. We typically go with, something that's more modern, but we want to make it to where it's appealing to the tenant that is going to rent it. Yeah. And so I think that just the luxury vinyl, whenever that started coming into play and the carpet kind of started to fade out, I think that was a game changer. Yeah. And then of course, whenever people do, take out the sod and do turf yard, stuff like that, it just makes it lower maintenance for the tenants, and ultimately that's what they want.
Yep. Yeah. I agree. I think the other thing too that we've seen, like longer term is like, let's say the rent market is, like I was saying, $900 to $1,400 a month, right?
Yeah.
We price it for, it's brand new construction or your first time leasing the property.
Mm-hmm.
We price it at $1,250.
Yeah.
We want to get a tenant in there. And then the way that we justify increasing the rent, let's say to $1,300 or $1,350, or even all the way up to $1,400
Mm-hmm.
is because the property manager is communicating so actively with the tenant, managing the property so well, getting maintenance calls addressed right off the bat.
Of course.
That's what keeps the tenant happy.
Yeah.
And then you've justified that rental increase to that tenant, right?
Yeah.
So they lease it for 12 months. You call them at the end of 12 months like, hey, we gave you that introductory rate. We're going to push the rent to $1,325 on renewal.
Mm-hmm.
They're most of the time happy to do that.
Absolutely.
Because you've earned their trust and like the value of that additional rent. Like every time something breaks, they're out here within 24, 48 hours. They get it fixed.
Oh, yeah.
My kids have electricity. That's where I've seen a lot go wrong in property management. Like other companies that haven't managed that process, they're not people focused.
Yeah. And that's one of the things I tell my owners, I'm going to have a very good relationship with any tenant that I put in place, that first and foremost, because I want them to feel comfortable with me. And really, whenever you see the problems in property management, it is because of the manager not communicating with that resident.
Yeah.
And so whenever you're a property manager in place, you want to just be overly kind and just take the resident is paying the bill. You're ultimately, for the owner. So we have to make sure that resident is happy no matter what.
Absolutely.
And so I think the people based is definitely something that is a huge benefit that we provide at Modern Day Living, because we want them to be comfortable if there's something that happens. And even if it's at their fault, we want them to be comfortable telling me about it so I can get my maintenance team out there, and it's something whenever you're doing quarterly inspections and you're walking that property and you see something on the wall. Okay, hey, this is something that I would charge you whenever you moved out. Do you want me to get my maintenance team out here to kind of fix it for you? Is this something that you can take care of? But it's just really explaining options as if, you were talking to a purchaser or a seller that is going to do it, and explaining all the options that they have, treating them like a person is a huge benefit.
I love that.